The sun broke over the sprawling, sluggish Mississippi, painting the river in strokes of molten gold. The air hung thick with a perennial, cottony fog that swallowed sound and sight whole. Locals called it the Veil, a damp breath that rolled off the water and settled deep in the bones. On the east bank, nestled in the crook of a forgotten bend, was the town of Mercy. Mercy had always been a quiet place. Its people lived by the river's mood, fishermen who knew better than to venture too far into the dense, white soup of the Veil. Wives who watched from porches as their husbands' boats were swallowed by the gray, and children who played in yards that sloped down to the whispering water. At the north end of town stood the old schoolhouse, its white paint peeling like sunburned skin. For the past 10 years, the children had learned their letters there from a man named Leo. Leo was finishing the morning lesson, his voice a steady murmur against the chorus of restless shuffling. He wasn't a strikingly handsome man, but there was a calm clarity in his gaze, a stillness that seemed out of place. He placed his book on the worn oak desk. A small girl with wide, earnest eyes piped up, her request more of a plea. "Mr. Leo, can we have a story today instead of sums?" A chorus of young voices joined hers. "Yeah, a story. Tell us about the river." Leo's mouth softened into a faint, almost reluctant smile. He was notoriously bad at denying them. "Very well, but just one." He leaned back against the desk. "They say a long, long time ago, before any of our great-great-grandparents were born, a man of incredible power came to this very river. He walked right into the Veil, they say, and he meant to cross all the way to the other side. The morning light grew strong, cutting dusty shafts through the schoolhouse windows. The story was only half done when the clock chimed noon. The children groaned, but Leo's expression grew firm. "Time to head home," he stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Your mothers will worry." He paused, his eyes drifting to the window overlooking the fog-shrouded river. It's not safe to dawdle." He saw them out, his hand lingering on the doorknob. He turned back to the room of young faces. "Study hard," he told them, his voice oddly solemn. "Be good. Listen to your parents. Do you understand?" A ragged chorus of "Yes, Mr. Leo," echoed back. Once the schoolhouse was empty, Leo walked through the silent building to the small living quarters at the rear. In the postage stamp yard, a man in a simple white shirt was tending to a patch of struggling roses. Their eyes met, a silent conversation passing between them in an instant. "It's time," Leo said softly. "They found us." The man in white gave a single, slow nod, his gaze lingering on the crimson blooms. "Then let's go." They were gone between one breath and the next. Not 15 minutes later, the sky over Mercy filled with a sound like tearing silk. People spilled from their homes, faces upturned in awe and terror as figures descended from the clouds, alighting on the riverbank like gulls. Some plunged directly into the impenetrable veil. Children pointed and shrieked, "Angels! Look, angels!" A young man with cold, sculpted features and hair the color of winter wheat landed in the center of town. His gaze swept over the gathering crowd. "Have you seen two men?" he asked, his voice devoid of warmth. "They would stand out. They may have passed through here, heading for the river." The children stared, mesmerized by his unearthly beauty. A boy finally found his tongue. "Nobody goes into the Veil, mister. My mama says there are haints in there. Bad things." The young man, Cashin, dismissed him with a flick of his eyes. A subordinate approached and murmured that they had scoured the entire region. If the targets weren't here, they had to be beyond the Veil, in the place known as the Mire. Cashin's face darkened. "If they've truly entered the Mire, we wait for reinforcements. We do not go in blind." He was the de facto leader of this hunting party, a prodigy from the influential Sterling family. He cast his awareness out, a psychic net over the drowsy town. He saw fishermen on the water, women in kitchens, children running home. Nothing seemed amiss. He was about to give the order to withdraw when a young voice, clear as a bell, carried to his preternaturally sharp ears. Just like the man in Mr. Leo's story, that angel is gonna go into the veil just like he did. Cashin froze. In a blink, he was back on the ground, towering over the speaker, the same bold boy from before. The child recoiled, his face draining of color. What Cashin's voice was ice is on the other side of this river. The boy trembled, tears springing to his eyes. It's a real bad place. We ain't supposed to go. I don't know nothing. I swear. Soon, all the children nearby were wailing, crying for their mothers, their fathers, and for their teacher. Cashin's eyes narrowed. He gestured, and a spear of shimmering, liquid silver appeared in his hand. Its tip came to rest under the chin of the trembling mayor. Who, he demanded, is this Mr. Leo the children speak of? The mayor stammered, sweat beading on his brow. He's our schoolteacher. Fine man. The children, they adore him. His name? Leo. Leo Gray. When did he come to Mercy? The mayor didn't hesitate. Oh, he was born here. Came as a babe with his mother. She passed young and he stayed on to teach. But the boy who had spoken earlier shouted, confusion overriding his fear. That ain't right. Mr. Leo came 10 years ago. I was just born then. A visible tremor went through the mayor. The child is mistaken, he insisted. A desperate smile plastered on his face. He's always been here. Ask anyone. But more children nodded, backing their friend. Cashin's lips curled into a thin, cruel smile. Leo Gray. And you, he said to the boy, what is your name? The boy puffed out his small chest. Mr. Leo said I was born in the fall. He named me River. Cashin laughed. A short, bitter sound. How sentimental. Naming others after the ghosts of your past. In one fluid, brutal motion, the silver spear flashed. The mayor fell. A stunned silence was shattered by screams. Cashin's power pressed down, and the earth at the feet of the gathered women cratered, dropping them into a pit with cries of pain. Where is he? Cashin's voice cut through the chaos. When no one answered, he continued, his tone conversational. I will kill one of you every minute. When you are all dead, I will have the children light the pyre. Your blood is on his hands. He counted the seconds in the suffocating quiet. When the first minute passed, he flicked a finger. A shard of condensed air shot toward a woman in the pit. It shattered inches from her face. Cashin smiled. Leo! A figure emerged from the wall of fog bordering the river. He wore simple, homespun clothes, his features ordinary but set in fierce resolve. He met Cashin's gaze across the ruined town square. With my power, killing you would be simple, Leo stated, his voice cold. With my mentor's power, erasing every one of you would take a thought. What makes you so bold? Cashin? What trap have you laid? Celestial severance array. Cashin roared. The air around Mercy hummed, then solidified into a visible, dome-like barrier of interlacing light. Leo's expression shifted to one of grim recognition. He had faced variations of this collective formation for decades. It didn't rely on individual strength, but on the combined will and energy of many. Here, bolstered by 2 elders of immense power and over 100 others, it created a defense nearly impenetrable. Leo's gaze swept over the terrified children, the weeping women. His hand dropped to his side, and when it rose, it held a long, pale sword that seemed to draw the warmth from the air. He moved, a blur of motion that crashed against the glowing barrier. The impact rang like a giant bell. Within the array, Cashin stood at the nexus, a silver spear in hand. Channeling the formation's power, he met Leo's assaults, parrying blows that should have shattered him. But Leo's attacks grew more ferocious, a relentless storm. Finally, a thrust slipped through, aiming for Cashin's heart. Cashin's eyes widened. Hold the line. Every member of the hunting party focused their energy downward. The dome of light solidified further, transforming from an offensive lattice into a sheer, defensive wall. Leo disengaged, his sword held ready. The children stared, unable to comprehend their gentle teacher, now a figure of terrifying grace and violence. Cassian watched him warily, his attention split, waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the legendary mentor to strike from the shadows. "Are you envious of me?" Leo asked suddenly, a small, curious smile on his lips. Cassian flinched. "Don't be absurd." The smile grew. "I think you are. Decades ago, you were ahead of me. Now, I stand at a threshold you can barely perceive while you still struggle in the foothills. Of all the so-called prodigies of our generation, only one ever held my respect. The rest were simply scenery." Cassian's knuckles were white on his spear. "You arrogant. I shattered the myth of your collective brilliance a lifetime ago." Leo continued, his voice conversational yet carrying across the square. "I led where you followed. I faced trials that would have broken you. And now you need an army and a borrowed fortress just to look me in the eye." He paused, as if searching his memory. Cassian Sterling. "You're the fourth son, aren't you?" Took me a moment to recall. The condescension was a physical blow. Cassian's control wavered, a spike of pure rage short-circuiting his focus for a single, catastrophic second. It was all the opening needed. A pressure like a mountain descended. Cassian and his elders whirled, but it was too late. From the direction of the river, a man in white had acted with silent, devastating speed. A large, ornate riverboat now hovered in the air, and upon its deck stood the entire population of Mercy. The fishermen plucked from the water, the women and children lifted from the pit. The man in white, Arthur, stood at the prow, his presence an anchor of absolute, quiet authority. Leo breathed out, tension leaving his shoulders. "Arthur." Arthur gave a slight nod. The immediate danger to the townsfolk was neutralized. Leo turned back to Cassian, who was staring in furious disbelief at the full rescue that had occurred under his nose. "Decades ago," Leo said, raising his sword, "I wounded your seventh brother with a single stroke. Today I will do the same to you, the fourth." The battle was no longer a stalemate. Unfettered by concern for the bystanders, Leo became a force of nature. His sword called down forks of lightning that scorched the earth where Mercy once stood. It drew water from the Mississippi itself, great torrents that washed over the fractured land. From the deck of the floating riverboat, the people of Mercy watched their homes dissolve into the churning, misty water, their faces etched with a grief too deep for tears. When the last villager had been found and brought aboard, Arthur gave the signal. Leo, with a final, contemptuous glance at the array, where Cassian and his followers were straining just to maintain their defensive shell, broke off his attack. "We're leaving," Leo said. They turned as one, two streaks of light piercing the heart of the vale. "Don't you dare run!" Cassian screamed, propelling the entire celestial severance array forward to pursue. The elders cautioned him, but his logic was cold and clear. If Arthur was at full strength, they'd already be dead. Their fear was proof of weakness. If the fugitives reached the mire, they would be lost. The hunting party, encased in their glowing bubble, pushed into the fog. The world dissolved into a uniform, blinding white. Sound died. After what felt like miles, one of the elders spoke, unease thick in his voice. "We should turn back." "Just a little further," Cassian insisted. 100 yards more, and the pressure around them changed. The fog wasn't just water vapor anymore. It felt alive, clinging, probing at the edges of their psychic senses. Then, from the absolute whiteness ahead, a soft green light bloomed, gentle as a firefly. It pulsed once, washing over their array. The reaction was instant and violent. The intricate weave of their defensive light shattered like glass under a hammer. The psychic backlash threw them all to the ground, the collective groan of 100 wounded souls echoing in the sudden silence. The fog swirled, already beginning to hide them from each other. From the impenetrable white, Leo's voice came, calm and final. "I never had any intention of breaking your barrier. I only needed you to follow." Cashin, struggling to his knees amidst his disoriented and groaning forces, could only stare into the consuming nothingness as the footsteps of his quarry faded away, swallowed whole by the hungry, dreaming dark of the mire.